Good day, everybody. Attorney Greg Lake here. Welcome to the Entheogenic Esquire podcast and YouTube channel. Very grateful again to be here today. Thank you for everyone who's already showed up. Appreciate everybody who showed up yesterday. I guess the live stream went okay. It wasn't my greatest day ever. I think as I stated, we had issues with the water pipes freezing. To figure that out, which we did get it figured out, but my outline and preparation suffered a little bit. So today is going to be a different day. Last night I was watching Barron's live stream, and during that whole process, I'll tell you what happened. If any of y'all watched Barron's live stream last night, he started talking about this media motion, which I will address that in tomorrow's live stream, I believe. But this motion it was actually filed by Tyler Robinson's defense team, is being opposed by the media or vice versa. Either way, there's the issue, right, with Tyler Robinson's defense team wanting to essentially hold all of these proceedings in private. Now, when Barron first mentioned it, and I will agree with Barron that it is rather difficult to search the filings there on the Utah court website. And so I'm glad that he definitely picked that out and brought it up. I will be covering it tomorrow in a bit of detail. But through that, he stated, and I feel him there, that it's kind of all gloves off in a sense of course, I was already starting to kind of pick apart, or at least very in-depth analysis of Tyler Robinson's legal defense. Barron related my impression that he was a little bit reserved in that at first, but based upon this new motion that's been filed, gloves are coming off and it is what it is. So, in that spirit, I had been debating on whether to actually do a video about this, or at least do it this soon in the context of all the coverage here. But today we're going to be talking about the prospects of Tyler Robinson's defense being able to, and I know some people are going to, not like this, but exhume Charlie Kirk's biologic, right? His main biologic, his body, for forensic analysis. Okay. And I know that's probably shocks the conscience of a lot of people. I get it, but these things do happen, right? I'm pretty sure most people here are familiar with bodies do get exhumed. And they get analyzed, right? When other evidence is not available here for obvious reasons, we'll talk about that. Many times the body is unfortunately one of the last places to go to be able to get some of the crucial and critical evidence that's needed, particularly in this case. I will argue here in a minute. Elena says, I assume that was why he hadn't been buried. We'll say, I'm not really even sure what the status of his body is. And to be quite honest with y'all, I've said this several times too, I haven't completely written it off in my mind, or at least the possibility, right, that, Charlie Kirk might still be walking around. I'll say this is that right after the incident happened, whenever we had Kash Patel doing his whole, see you in Valhalla, brother, escapade there was a creator, I believe on TikTok, that had posted a video that showed Tyler Robinson. And many of y'all have probably seen this picture, but it's a picture of Tyler Robinson, and he's standing next to his, I think, desktop computer in his bedroom. Cash is a joke. I would tend to agree. But he's standing next to his computer, like his home desktop in his room, and on that screensaver, so on the screen is his screensaver, and on that screen is a picture of what looks to be a very nice looking exotic tropical island. And so, me, like most other, I thought absolutely nothing of it, right? Nothing of it. Just another picture of the alleged defendant here, or alleged perpetrator. And wow, look, he's in his bedroom. He looks like an innocent young man, quite frankly, by the pictures. But then the Valhalla comment came in, which I thought was weird, just as it is, right? I mean, let's get real. Anyways, this video that I saw, it was like a short TikTok, little short video, but basically showed that the island that was displayed on Tyler Robinson's screensaver, that island, I want to say, is like right off the coast of New Zealand or something like that, but it has a resort called Valhalla. And I can't remember exactly, but I want to say that it's like been known as kind of like a real private destination retreat for like super wealthy people. I don't know that for sure, but I do remember it saying, "Hey, that's this island with a resort called Valhalla," and obviously the implication being that Cash Patel, oh slick Cash, that his comments were kind of an underhanded thing, aiming at the fact that Charlie Kirk's could be right at this exotic island resort called Valhalla. So, that right there, it was pretty incredible. Internet, some of the people, some of y'all out here, I guess me in a way too, but man, we're pretty incredible with the research skills and stuff like that, and just the refusal to take answers that we feel are deceptive, and literally no stone unturned. No stone unturned to be able to go like identify an island and stuff like that's pretty incredible. So I just wanted to bring that little anecdote up as kind of what initially, you know, told me not to sell myself 100% throughout this whole deal, on the fact that he's even not with us anymore. Okay. And again, that's all sure purely speculation. And I haven't completely made up my mind one way or the other on this. And, I've been getting a lot of comments, and some of them not so nice, from people who are really, really sold on this Charlie Kirk isn't alive idea. And they want to go and take it further and kind of insinuate that because I'm not, I guess, every episode just focusing on that I'm somehow part of it. Somehow now I'm part of a satanic synagogue. So you see how that goes. It doesn't bother me. I don't get offended, obviously, but it's one of those things like, come on now. Anyways, with that being said, with today's episode, we're going to be really jumping into kind of the legal paradigm surrounding Tyler Robinson, his defense team's ability to perhaps go and inspect Charlie Kirk's body, right? That's really what we're covering out today. So again, for those people who are so dead stuck on Charlie Kirk is still alive, look, in order for Tyler Robinson's team to be able to get access to, or maybe not access to, Charlie Kirk's body, we're going to have to play the game of this an actual unaliving event. More particularly, we're still going to have to kind of play with the gunshot idea. Okay. So I know y'all aren't going to like that, but just understand that if we want to, in fact, go and confirm or deny whether, Mr. Kirk's actually been unalive, we're going to need to play that game, at least if we want to go through the court system and in the context of Mr. Robinson's trial, which I assume we would, because going through that, avenue not only lets us further our investigation and satisfy some of our curiosities, obviously, but it also has incidental effect of potentially avoiding us having to watch a complete injustice, due process disaster, which, if no one tries to course correct here, could end up in the death of another innocent man again. So anyways, with that being said, for those who are still going with he's still walking around with us, I get it. Just please sit back and listen to what I have to say. Ultimately, what I'm advocating for here would be going to help support or reject, that theory. Last thing I just want to say real quick before I jump in, and this is going to just real quick statement about the class action. So one, and I just want to make it clear, I have not agreed in any way to take up that class action per se. Just to be honest, I've been doing some research about it, and this is the TPUSA donor class action that we talked about yesterday. I'm doing some research. There might possibly even be some issues with classifying or certifying that class action. And so I just really want to hammer the point home right now that if you're a donor and you think that you might have a claim against TPUSA or these other entities, go seek local good counsel. I can definitely help you find a good lawyer if you need it. It's just, I don't want anyone to potentially miss like a statute of limitations date or nothing like that, because they were under the impression that I was, working immediately to go and get all this together and go file a lawsuit. I'm not. Okay. And that's not because I think that this is a terrible lawsuit or anything like that. It's just obviously with a class action suit, there's just a few logistics involved with getting all that lined up. And by all means, if you're a donor and it's been a while, you definitely want to make sure that if you're wanting to go and press that issue, that you don't get thrown out on a statute of limitations issue. So just wanted to throw that out there. But again, I am doing research, and I'll definitely be reporting those findings, things of that nature. I did a couple hours case law research last night, so I'm definitely working on it. But just want to make people know what the status of that was per se. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right in. Now, I will say that I spent a good bit of time for this specific episode putting together my outline. And so I'm going to stick to my outline pretty good, and we'll be reading from it from time to time. And I guess the way I can justify that is, for at least for the people who are Barron fans, y'all definitely sit there and listen to him read his whole opening statements, which are great, by the way, and I love it. But for me, I don't do opening statements. I'm going to let him have that. But I am doing outlines, and so sometimes I might be sticking to it. But anyways, also, Buddy Bear's with us today. We're going to be getting some good work done. So I feel confident that y'all are going to really like this because, again, it really amounts to putting pressure on the state, on the government to get truthful and hopefully not have to see a grave injustice go down right in front of our eyes. So yeah. Okay. So here we go. So today we're going to be taking really what I would say a second look at the covering the cover-up episode that I previously done, and we're going to be adding an additional layer here to our due process analysis, and that is going to be whether the exhumation and inspection of Charlie Kirk's biologic or his person, his body, for purposes of either confirming or rejecting both the states and or other defense experts' theories, right? So this could go potentially both ways, but I think, as I'm going to argue, during the course of this episode, is that really the probability of that evidence being, it being favorable for Tyler Robinson's over the state's case is more likely than not, right? So that's kind of the position we're going to be taking. But again, the evidence there could potentially firm up the state's theory of the case, right? So just want to put that out there. Hell, it might figure out that there is no case. There is nothing there. So yeah, anyways, so counsel for, and this is what I'm about to say here is kind of relating back to when we talked about filing the due process motion for the actual covering up of the crime scene. And we were talking about potential remedies, right? Everything from an outright dismissal of the case to something as simple as, excluding some other item of evidence or an adverse inference or instruction to the jury. But really, Tyler Robinson's counsel doesn't necessarily need to seek a punitive retribution for the cover-up, which would be like a dismissal necessarily, but instead should seek remediation from the court in the form of a reasonable opportunity to conduct a forensic examination equivalent to that foreclosed by the state's alteration of the scene. So basically, a lot of the evidence that we could have gathered from a full analysis of the actual crime scene, what I'm saying is that, well, some of that could be made up by some of the data points that we could theoretically get through this type of analysis, right? And so when we're looking at filing the due process motion for the covering up of the crime scene, what I'm getting at is that an offer to exhume and inspect Charlie Kirk's person could be what we would say like a negotiation or something to where it's like, okay, state, although, and I will say this, in my opinion, the covering up of the crime scene very well might warrant a dismissal. I mean, that's just my opinion. So really, and we're going to go in a little bit more detail about this, but at the end of the day, an offer to instead, just let us exhume and take a look and analyze the body, that could be a compromise, right? So really, in the long run, this could be a sell that could really validate both the due process motion for the cover up and then, allow some recovery from all the prejudice that, I think we're all pretty clear that there's pretty prejudicial to cover up the crime scene. So this represents some type of compromise in a sense, but we're going to talk further about it because it doesn't necessarily have to be presented as a compromise. By all means, Tyler Robinson's defense could present it as its own standalone motion and request, right? But we'll get into that in a little bit more detail here in just a second. what I want to say though is that ultimately, as opposed to a dismissal, the exhumation and inspection of Kirk's biologic, his person, would be in furtherance. Okay, when we're looking at dismissal versus this, really, doing the exhumation and analysis, inspection, really, that's in furtherance of the truth, right? Versus a dismissal, which would be, in my opinion, just and definitely warranted for covering up the crime scene. Really, this is more of a truth seeking and more commitment towards the truth per se, right? And ultimately, depending on, the results of that exhumation and inspection in the hypothetical one anyways, just think about what that would do for our independent investigations as well. And then what does that mean? Like in terms of what Candace is doing is that, well, those results could ultimately help show, if it's not Tyler Robinson responsible, who it was, right? So I think it's pretty clear right now that, being able to exhume and inspect that body would really speak to a lot of these other theories that we have going on. Everything from the exploding mic to the fact that he might still be alive, right? So there's a lot of positives that come out of, this exhumation and inspection. Versus if it was just a straight dismissal or something like an adverse in jury instruction, right? So thinking back here, thinking back again to the covering of the Coverup episode, discussing the propriety of the Coverup that happened of the campus there. I think we pretty much concluded, at least I did on all of our behalf, I guess, that it's pretty clear that this covering up the crime scene is a pretty serious due process violation. Again, in my opinion. And obviously we discussed the remedial acts. There's certain things that the judge can do to try to quote unquote level the playing field. I think it's and we discussed this, but I don't think it's a mystery or very doubtful that, the experts that we've been kind of listening to on the defense, or just these experts in general, had they been able to do a proper investigation and analysis at the actual crime scene, we would be in a much different spot. I mean, just in terms of the substantive evidence in the case, the procedure, we might not even be here, right? As far as talking about Tyler Robinson's defense, had that crime scene not be covered up. Now, in this vein, I want to point out that pretty much all the ballistics experts that I've seen or heard discussing this matter, on YouTube and these other platforms, I mean, I think the consensus is that it's way more likely, and I'd be very extraordinary if, in fact, Kirk was hit in the neck with a 30-06 bullet. Okay, I think that's pretty well established. Not saying impossible, but when we're looking at reasonable probabilities, I think there's more of a reasonable probability that that was not a 30-06 bullet wound to his neck, right? And then, we don't have the autopsy report and stuff here, so we don't really know what caused the actual unaliving. So I wanted to point that out too. Now, here's a very interesting tidbit that I think, and some of y'all might be aware. Okay, so here we go. Before I could jump into this, I'm going to be talking about an expert with a theory that still lies within, Charlie Kirk suffered an unfortunate gunshot wound to the neck. Okay, so and y'all might be aware of him. His name is Dr. Chris Martinson. He has this channel, Peak Prosperity. He's actually been interviewed on our buddy at Paramount Tactical. Okay, and again, I'm not buying into everything that Dr. Martinson is saying. Okay, we don't have to. However, according to him, he is a pathologist and toxicologist, and he has done obviously autopsies, things of this nature. He seems to be very knowledgeable about crime scene investigations. Now, I want to say real quick, I want to go over, because in one of the videos, is actually one of the first videos that he did about the Charlie Kirk case. And if I'm correct, basically what he was saying, that in his opinion, this is just the overall what I got from what Martinson was saying, is that he does think that it was a high-powered bullet or bullet wound to the neck. Okay. And again, I tend to disagree with him on that. However, he says that according to his calculations upon, based upon everything that he has, or at least had at the moment he made this video, is that it did not come from the Low C Center. And so therefore he does not think that Tyler Robinson, to the extent that it's alleged that Tyler Robinson took the shot from the Low C Center from 140 yards away, et cetera, with a 30-06, he does not believe that. And so with that being said, really, that's about all we're going to need to kind of get our foot in the door, so to speak, right? I mean, just in the sense that just based upon the available evidence, he has drawn into serious question, the state's theory, and even perhaps to some degree called into question. We haven't seen it yet, but we could have potentially called into question also the autopsy report in some respects. And so with that being said, he talks about, on this video that I watched, he talks about, what should have happened at the crime scene. So let's talk about that real quick. Let's talk about, according to Dr. Martinson, who seems to be pretty knowledgeable on regular crime scene investigations like these, what he said about what we should have seen as far as the handling of this crime scene. He says that we should have seen investigators crawling all over the place, taking pictures from every possible angle. They should have been looking for any projectiles and any other evidence in and around the scene, like physical evidence, like small pieces of plastic, maybe some residue or something, taking swabs, things of this nature. He didn't say that specifically, but I just kind of added that in. He states that, both investigators and experts never know after the fact what will be important or relevant to an investigation like this. And so you'd want to document everything, right? And to date, we have not seen where the investigators, whether state or federal or local, and really documented much of anything as far as right there at the crime scene. Apparently they took a bunch of pictures of this gun that was stored over there. And I saw a picture of the, where they allege that he was hunkered down on the rooftop, stuff like that. But I have yet to see any kind of real photo dump or analysis or any kind of figure showing any kind of analysis or testing, documenting that occurred at the actual crime scene where Charlie Kirk was sitting at the time that he was unalived. And then he says that there should have been FBI people, state investigators crawling all over the scene, taking, I think he said, tram shots of roof lines, measuring things or otherwise recording the incident, quote unquote, as it is, before it got disassembled, which he says happened very, very quickly. He said it was almost like they already knew what had happened before they even started their investigation, right? So again, why I bring this up is just to say that here we go. We have an expert, and this is not to call into question any of the other experts or other people that are out there doing theories. It's absolutely not. But I'm just saying with him, we do have someone who's a confirmed doctorate, who has, what I feel sufficient credentials, who can go into court in this matter and give us an opinion about how detrimental, losing the crime scene evidence was. I think with the nature of his theory, as I understand it, that he would be able to show that there is a reasonable probability that the evidence that was covered up would have been inculpatory for, or I say exculpatory for Tyler Robinson, right? And furthermore, I think that he could testify that being able to exhume and analyze Charlie's body would be some type of substitute in replacement of the evidence right there at the actual crime scene, right? So I don't know that for sure. I don't know that he would say that, but I'm just doing this kind of figuratively for purposes of the analysis today, just to give y'all an idea of what's going to be required, what kind of the process or procedure is for Tyler Robinson's defense team to be able to possibly exhume and inspect Charlie Kirk's body. Okay. We discussed the filing of a motion asserting Tyler Robinson's due process rights have been violated by paving over the crime scene. And in order to do so, remember, we said that Tyler Robinson, like all other defendants who've suffered from a destruction of evidence in Utah, would need to make an initial showing. Okay. Like I just said, that there's a reasonable probability that the evidence that was lost or destroyed would have been, at least in some way, exculpatory, meaning tending to show his innocence rather than his guilt. And we did our analysis, right? We discussed it at least in general terms in the last episode and concluded that we're pretty confident that he can make that showing. And here goes, and let me just speak a little bit more about that reasonable probability standard. It says that, basically that standard is, do we believe that the covering up of the crime scene and the evidence that was lost or destroyed therewith is sufficient to undermine our confidence in the outcome of the case? So right now, just ask yourself, thinking about the covering up of the crime scene, okay, all other things being equal, does that draw, for you, does it pull away or detract from your confidence in the outcome of this case if we were to proceed and nothing were to be done about that fact? Ask yourself that. I asked myself that. Hey, Susan. Hey, how you doing? Name is Susan. Yeah, me too. Yeah. So I asked myself that. And guess what? Yeah, absolutely. That amongst other things. But for sure, the covering up of the crime scene would tend to undermine my confidence in the outcome of this case if everything was to otherwise proceed as it is. So with that being said, I think that we can, sorry, I got kind of close to the mic. With that being said, I think that we can now assume that the court would probably agree with us that this initial showing has been made. Okay. And then we talked about the second part of the analysis, right? So we do have expert testimony indicating that the Fed slop narrative is highly unlikely. Okay. And that inspecting the crime scene would have helped, these different experts firm up their theories. Well, affirm it up or reject it, right? And that's what we're looking for. Evidence that will let these experts or the state either reject or further confirm their theories. Okay. That's pretty well established. For our purposes, we're assuming that. We don't know the level of culpability of the state, which, as we discussed, is also relevant to that analysis. And basically it's like the culpability of the state, meaning how much fault they had, like negligence versus recklessness versus straight intentional, is really going to be outcome determinative in many cases on what the judge decides to do about the due process violation. And we just don't know any specific reasons behind the destruction of the evidence. We can surely speculate pretty good as to why they destroyed that evidence. And I don't think that speculation even requires me talking about it. I think we all pretty much know exactly why they would have covered up that crime scene the way that they did. So we did decide, though, that the degree of prejudice that Tyler Robinson would suffer because of the missing evidence in the context of the case as a whole is great, right? Great enough to where it's going to undermine our trust in the ultimate result or outcome of the case. And so, hold on just a second. So, however, though, if we consider Charlie Kirk's body, his biologic, as part of the remaining evidence, okay, so now we're looking at take the crime scene evidence away. And what do we have left? Well, we do have this one. Theoretically, we do anyways, right? we might not. Theoretically, we do have this one piece of evidence that's still, kind of hanging out there that could be examined, that could help alleviate, give us at least some of the data points or similar data points to that which we could have gotten had we been able to do a full expert analysis, review, testing, et cetera, or investigation of the crime scene. And so the reason why I'm, getting here is to say this, is that, instead of going to court and saying, judge, here's this due process violation, they covered over the crime scene, it's so prejudicial, we'll never be able to recover, this case needs to be dismissed. Well, again, it could be offered as a compromise to say that, well, judge, look, yeah, it's severe and this prejudice is pretty bad. But, we could compromise if the state would be amenable and we can coordinate it to setting up to have this exhumed so we can inspect it. Well, that could help cure some of the prejudice, meaning that we don't necessarily have to dismiss this case. And so the state, theoretically, should be supportive of this, right? Shouldn't they be supportive? Because I'm telling you, and again, I don't think we're looking at a normal case in far as like expecting this to go down legally as other cases have, both procedurally and perhaps even substantively. And so again, offering the exhumation inspection could, could be attractive for the state, right? Just depending on how they view their covering up of the crime scene and their estimation of how severe the court might be likely to punish them. They could really be, that really could be an attractive option for them. Let's see. So, and I'll just rubber stamp this again, but my opinion on the crime scene cover up itself is that yes, severe, warrants dismissal, or at the very least a very strong adverse inference or jury instruction, instructing the jury that as it relates to that stuff that was covered up, they're to assume that that evidence was not favorable to the state's case or the state's theory. Being able to inspect the body could mean that Tyler Robinson would only be entitled to something minor, like maybe exclusion of evidence. So again, because exhumation of the body and inspection could help cure potentially some of the prejudice that might otherwise be suffered as a consequence, right, of covering over the crime scene. If we're able to inspect the body, maybe judge doesn't do any further, punishing or trying to level the scales, so to speak. So maybe they wouldn't, after that, need to give the jury an adverse instruction or exclude other evidence, things of that nature. Because again, this is kind of a scale, a spectrum of what the judge can do, from dismissal to simple excluding some other piece of evidence. So again, this exhumation of the body could help us fit better within that scale, and ultimately, if we consider both the state and Tyler's interests, could actually serve both interests there the best. So just want to point that out. Again, I say the state should embrace this inspection, because quite frankly, this case should be dismissed due to the painfully obvious prejudice flowing from the cover up of the crime scene. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if the state has full faith and credit in its 30-06, shooter, bullet to the neck theory, then it shouldn't be any issue, right? If they are firm and that's what they believe happened, then why would it be any issue other than, we definitely need to consider the family, stuff like that. I'm not saying put them completely out of the question, but considering the state and its interest and its theory in the case, right? There should be no harm, no foul. By all means, it should firm everything up, right? And according to the state, should clear everything up, right? And proceed straight to trial after that. Anyways, but if this whole charade, and yes, I am calling the Tyler Robinson proceedings, in my opinion, a charade at this point, is, as some others also believe it to be, a complete and total magic trick and dark magic, right? Everything that they've pulled here, in my opinion, then this video will be hitting close to home and could get removed. Okay. I'm sorry. I read this wrong context, but yeah, I don't know. This video might hit a little bit too far over the target. I hope not. But yeah, if in fact this was some kind of really dark magic trick, then I would assume that the powers that be would not want us going to look to see, Mr. Kirk's body. Just saying. Let's see. So next, how do courts usually treat these requests to exhume bodies? As I said earlier, this does happen, and I would assume that most people here have either watched like Law and Order or some true crime show, or even seen it on the news, where in prior cases, murder cases, or maybe other cases too, but murder cases for sure, where a body is exhumed. It happens a lot too, like in old cold case files, right? To get DNA, things of this nature. Oh yeah. So remember whenever DNA technology came out, there's no telling how many cases that they went back and actually exhumed bodies to try to get evidence to try and match perpetrators for various crimes. So again, this has most definitely been done before. It's well within the gamut of possibilities. In advocating for this, I'm in no way advocating that we just throw all the feelings or the sensitivity of dealing with a dead body. I do consider dead bodies sacred, right? And I do consider burial rites to be sacred, stuff like that. So this isn't something that me personally feels good getting up and saying, hey, let's go dig those people up. But in this instance, because whether or not we see actual and substantial justice in this case affects everybody, and then I also think too about what would Charlie want? For real, what would Charlie want? And I'm not going to speculate on that, but what would Charlie want? I mean, I tend to believe, if it's as I think many of us are thinking about the magic trick and stuff, that, well, I'll tell you back, not the magic trick, but if indeed Charlie Kirk was unalived, I tend to think, just my opinion, that to the extent that we're really trying to get to the bottom of this, serve justice, and the fact that there's a possibility that it could have been even perhaps people near and dear to him, right? I tend to think that he might be okay with it, but I'm not going to speculate beyond that. Okay. I'm not going to speculate beyond that. And just to be, complete 100 up front, that's obviously not part of the analysis for the court. They're not going to say, oh, I wonder what Charlie would have wanted here, but just throwing it out there, because I know a lot of people like I tend to want to believe that Charlie was had some modicum of good in him and stuff, and that he would be supportive of our investigation, along these lines in the court proceedings, obviously. Courts do have inherent authority to order exhumation in criminal cases when the evidence expected is to be uncovered is material, necessary, and proportional to resolving a dispute in the case. And so probably the number one dispute in which the exhumation of a body would be, called for would be exactly like this. This is like Exhibit A, right? Whenever cause of death is disputed. Here we weren't able to conduct a very thorough analysis or any analysis or investigation at all of the actual crime scene. This is one of those like Exhibit A of a case where body exhumation, in my opinion, where body exhumation is definitely on the table, and perhaps could be the best way to serve the ends of justice in this case. And so I just wanted to point that out. Exhumation in most cases is considered an extraordinary remedy, right? So this isn't something that courts, you're going to find them just willy-nilly authorizing, but it is on the table. It is on the table. And the reason why it's extraordinary, right? Because it's highly intrusive. The whole situation around exhuming a dead body can be a very emotionally sensitive, obviously, an emotionally sensitive situation, then logistically complex. Getting all the experts together, getting the people who are actually going to do the physical labor. Where are we going to take this? And you see what I mean? So there's going to be a lot of logistics involved with not only exhuming the body, but doing it in a very respectful way. Because, right, we're walking this balance between being respectful in our exhumation, doing it in a timely manner, and then trying to get all the data points that we feel that we need. And so there's this constant tug in between these three competing kind of interests going on, that a judge in the court has to kind of balance those things, right? And these aren't easy jobs. It's not an easy job, right? So the judge does not have an easy job here. So kudos to him. And again, it's this balance, being respectful, timeliness, getting all the data points. Generally, a court in an exhumation issue like this, they would be looking at whether the exhumation would likely produce evidence directly bearing on a contested element, like the cause of death. Could the evidence be obtained through less restrictive means? I mean, here it could have been obtained through least restrictive, lesser intrusive means had the crime scene been adequately preserved, or had it been adequately investigated at the time. Because, as far as I'm aware too, it's like, it's not just that they covered over the crime scene too. It's the fact that I don't think that they did, as Dr. Martinson states, actually doing the photographs, the measuring, they could have done all that. And that's usually what they do, right? They're usually out there with 50 of those little yellow things all over the street, taking pictures. Here comes the chalk, and as far as I'm aware, none of that occurred here. So it's like they could have done that. And then if they, and then the crime scene cover up wouldn't have been severe, if at all, right? Let's say that they had accounted for all the data points that experts would have been anxious in seeing. Well, then it really would have been no harm, no foul. Right. And in reality, and someone pointed this out, it's not like they can just tape it off, into infinity. I get that. But normally you don't have to. Normally it's taped off. Everyone's pushed way back out of the way. I was surprised by how many people they let just hang out in and around Terrell's Farm where grabbing SD cards. But normally that wouldn't have been cool. All that would have been documented, blah, blah, blah. And then had something like this paving over occurred, it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, you know? So yeah, there were lesser intrusive ways to get probably all or most evidence we could get off exhuming the body here, but we just don't have it. I haven't thought too deep about whether other data points exist that we can use, but based upon my impression of Dr. Martinson's video and analysis, there's not. He wouldn't have been really harping on the fact that they destroyed the crime scene so much had he felt, I believe, that there were other lesser intrusive ways to, or, items of evidence to use. The court would want to know whether the modern forensic techniques to be used are reliable and can produce probative results if the exhumation is ordered. So they just want to make sure, right, that these experts that we're going to let do whatever analysis, testing, measurements that they're going to do, that the court feels assured that this is going to be effective, right? That's going to be effective, and that if there's evidence gleaned from it, that it's going to be probative, and they probably even consider whether it's going to be admissible or not. And then they also want to know whether the benefits flowing from the exhumation are proportional to the intrusion incurred, right? And so obviously the more times you have to touch and examine physically the body, I would assume that it can further deteriorate. And so again, there's just kind of a balance there of how far are we going to take this examination as far as the intrusiveness of it, the potential destructive capabilities there. And so judge in most cases would really outline and spell out for the experts and the attorneys how this thing is going to go, what the boundaries are, what the limits, et cetera, et cetera. It would be a well-defined process. I'll put it to you like that. How would the argument or request for exhumation be presented to the court for consideration? So it could be presented either as a standalone motion. So this would be like a Daubert adjacent, Brady infused, fundamental fairness motion. Or it could be offered, as I've suggested, as a compromise on the crime scene cover-up issue, that due process issue. So the court ordered the body being exhumed versus dismissal as punishment to the state for covering up the crime scene. And so in that case, it's presented within the original motion. So basically, I would go ahead and just present my normal due process motion like we discussed in the last covering the cover-up episode. But within that motion, I would propose that the relief requested, or at least in the alternative, one of the alternatives at the very least would be to allow exhumation of Charlie Kirk's body for expert inspection and analysis. Okay. That's where I would lean on it. And the reason why I say that is because due to the highly politicized and public nature of this case, I don't think the judge, unfortunately, is going to throw a lot of bones to Tyler Robinson's defense team. I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't know why I say that. I think it's just kind of a gut feeling based upon the circumstances, but for sure, don't quote me on that. And so with that being said, I think asking for a dismissal from the court, it should definitely be done. But I think having solid expectations or very heavy expectations that that's going to be done would be foolhardy. With that being said, obviously, the way I would do this is presenting it as a due process challenge and a motion to dismiss, with the alternative being that, if dismissal's not warranted, that, the body be exhumed, in the alternative, and maybe perhaps also an adverse inference or something, right? So again, a number of these things, but for me, I feel like packaging it up as a kind of a compromise within the original due process motion is going to be the most effective, as opposed to a standalone filing a motion right now with how public it is, because people will get pretty up in arms about the idea of inspecting a dead body like this, especially Charlie Kirk's. And I get it. And so I think that, filing that as a standalone thing is going to garner a lot of negative attention, press, stuff like that. I think if we do it more in the context of, look, These due process violations from covering up the crime scene are so severe that this probably warrants dismissal. But hey, judge, you can save this by just, hey, let's exhume the body. And at the end of the day, that's going to be the most fundamentally fair process to do, even though we still could probably say that there's going to be some prejudice on Tyler Robinson's side, but that could potentially be cured too from a number of reasons. So again, that's just the way I feel. My professional opinion would be to do that. So anyways, what would Tyler Robinson's defense need to raise in the motion so the court will be able to render a full and final decision on the issue request? So obviously they're going to want to elucidate all the outstanding issues created by the covering up the crime scene, and or the and they would also want to elucidate the insufficiency of the available evidence in confirming or rejecting to an adequate degree the cause of Charlie Kirk's unaliving. So this motion too, right? You're going to want to attach an expert affidavit. I would, if it were me, I would also ask for an evidentiary hearing where I would present the oral testimony of these experts, but definitely in the motion, you're going to want to have some expert affidavits. What kind of experts in this instance? Well, then, like a forensic pathologist, like Dr. Martinson, that would be a decent one. Any kind of ballistics or wound pattern expert, and or a trauma or biomechanics expert. Again, this would just be experts that would be competent to really testify about the actual cause of death. Okay. And again, we have those experts in and around us. There's tons of other experts in this country. Like, Tyler Robinson's defense should have zero issue locating an appropriate expert. Okay. I'll just say that. The expert affidavits and the testimony to be given at the evidentiary hearing, if judge grants one, you'd want to obviously outline, again, the questions or issues that remain unresolved in the current evidentiary record. You would want to mention any specific forensic indicators which could still be addressed by the exhumation, and then why those are essential to proving or rejecting a theory as to the cause of death. So you want to say, here's what we expect that we could find as part of the exhumation and analysis. You would want to talk about why existing evidence and records such as autopsy reports, photos, videos are insufficient to completely accept or reject the cause of death theory, or why it calls into question the state's cause of death theory. And then why exhumation. You want to talk about why exhumation could materially resolve those uncertainties. So, let judge know why it's going to be effective or how it's going to be effective doing the exhumation analysis. And then you want to explain again why existing evidence is inadequate. Everything from incomplete or unavailable autopsy findings. These are just general examples of what would be said there, right? Incomplete or unavailable autopsy findings, inconsistency between the reported wounds and the observed video evidence, lack of any trajectory analysis, although Dr. Martinson does do some trajectory analysis, absence of retained projectiles or fragments. Again, I don't know 100%, none of us do, whether that's the case, but we haven't been notified that there's any of that. And then, unresolved questions about secondary versus primary injuries, right? So, some believe that there was a chest wound. So again, another unresolved issue that obviously an exhumation could squarely address. Granted, if it hasn't, if the body's actually there, if it hadn't degraded far enough to prevent, seeing these things. I'm not an expert on decomposition in those regards, but I'm thinking probably that we could probably still tell these things. Let's see. So the expert affidavits and testimony, they should explicitly define the parameters of the investigation. Again, like I just said, judge wants to ensure it's going to be a very structured thing, right? If this exhumation is granted, judge is going to really specifically tailor what's going to happen, what's going to occur, right? And so, some of these things would be who conducts the examination. Is it going to be all the defense experts? Is the state going to have some expert there? Are both going to be there? Are they going to come in all different times? See what experts are going to conduct the examination, where it will occur, what procedures will be performed. Again, you want to make sure that the expert is telling judge that the procedures and things that they're going to do are going to lead, at least hypothetically, theoretically, to the discovery of probative and probably admissible evidence. They'll want to know how remains will be reinterred. So how are we going to, subsequent to the analysis, get Charlie back to his final resting place, if in fact he's got a final resting place. And then how the chain of custody will be preserved. So basically, once the body is resumed, we're going to need a chain of custody with whoever has possession of it. And I think I explained this the other day in the context of the text messages, but chain of custody, whenever an item of evidence comes into court, in order for it to be admitted, well, in most cases, you're going to be able to need to prove, from the time it was acquired by law enforcement or whoever to the time it shows up to court, there needs to be some kind of documentation of who had the evidence, when they had it, what did they do with it, when did they pass it off, in a chain all the way leading up into the courthouse. So the same thing would need to be done, need to be told the judge how the chain of custody is going to be preserved during the course of this exhumation and analysis. And then the defense should offer to fund the whole thing. So, and this is a weird question. I don't know if Tyler's being treated as an indigent or not. I don't think he is, but I do think that he has appointed counsel, which is kind of strange. A lot of strange things about it. But normally, if he's not indigent, he would need to be funding this. Okay. Now, if he was indigent, okay, then perhaps, the motions can be made and the state can pay for experts and can pay for things like this. Essentially, it would be part of like an expert retainer fee is the way I would kind of categorize it, is that, okay, we want to hire this expert. And in paying that expert, we also need to pay for this expert to be able to conduct the test, the exhumation, along those lines. So that's generally what we should see in the motion and in the expert affidavit and testimony needed to present in order to get authority to do this exhumation, right? So what is the state's likely argument against the motion? Okay, so this is kind of in contrast to what I said earlier and what I'm about to say one more time, and that's, in my opinion, the state should support the exhumation because under normal circumstances, they would probably be facing a straight up dismissal for the covering up of the crime scene. And so allowing this exhumation and the biologic analysis of Charlie Kirk's person would likely keep the case in court, right? Unless the inspection very well could uncover something that firms up the state's theory, right? Maybe we've been all wrong this whole time, so if I'm Tyler Robinson's defense attorney, I'm definitely at least in front of a judge acting like, that, hey, could firm up their theory potentially, although we want to make sure that we remain on the side that there's going to be exculpatory evidence here. At least as it relates to the cover up of the crime scene, it wouldn't be as important in asking for the exhumation and analysis per se here. But still could be relevant to the analysis. But the state would probably object on grounds of, and I'll admit ChatGPT kind of came up with some of these for me because I feel like it's beneficial to them. I was having a hard time getting my mind to even think about what their objections, but ChatGPT is like finality, trauma to the family. I see that one's decomposition. Sure. I mean, I guess there is a possibility that if it's there, it has degraded enough to where we wouldn't be able to really get anything from it. But along those lines, I would say that I'm sure probably one of the experts that we have, the pathologist probably knows a thing or two about decomposition, could probably testify as to their belief as is there going to be some evidence there for us to find? I'm sure there's an expert or someone in and around this case that could testify to that. We're going to assume for our purposes that that evidence could be found. And then they would also, obviously object on grounds of speculation. Sure, of course it's speculation. I mean, we'll never know, for sure what if anything is going to be found there. But at the end of the day, considering the cover up of the crime scene, they've kind of put us into this speculatory position, right? It's really they're the cause of the speculation, because had they either appropriately investigated and documented the crime scene or just straight up preserved it, we probably would not be in this situation. Just my opinion. Um, One response should be that exhuming the body would actually speed up the case. Okay, here we go. I know y'all are gonna like this one. So Erica Kirk, right? What does she want? Speed it up, speed it up. She filed the notice, invoking her speedy trial rights. First time I've ever seen that one. But okay, if I'm defense attorney, I'm gonna get up in court and say, Judge, I mean, let's be real. All these expert theories that the defense, and I would say, is entertaining and we're looking at, it's going to take a really long time for these experts to, come. Oh, that's another thing, right? Because right now, the defense attorneys and the experts have to like physically go to the prosecutor's office, schedule an appointment, look at the evidence, all this stuff. That's going to take a lot of time. And so for Erica Kirk, hey, Erica, I got something for you. If we can just dig up Charlie's body, okay, and let our experts inspect it, it'll probably take less than 1 day. Man, that would has the potential to drastically cut down on the amount of time that's going to take to get this case, at least from the defense perspective, ready to go to trial. Right? So just wanted to point that one out. Let's see. So how might the court react to this request? Okay. Because that's obviously probably on a lot of people's mind. And I kind of addressed this not too long ago about, how would they address it? This is not a normal case. I'm, in my mind, ladies and gentlemen, conceptually, when I think about this case, I think about it not as a normal case. I think there's something fishy going on. And so I don't get my hopes and expectations up too far on how the court would rule on this. But, we could talk about how they might approach it. Based upon what I've seen thus far, it seems that this is not a normal case. And I venture to say that we might not see such a request made. Yeah, so it's unfortunate, but please don't be surprised if we don't see a due process challenge for covering up the crime scene. Don't be surprised if we do not see a request to exhume Charlie's body in order to try to make up for the prejudice that has been, incurred due to the covering up of the crime scene. And so, but if the challenge is lodged, either of them, I'll be very surprised. I'll be surprised. Also, if it does, I won't be surprised, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, if it gets denied or if some kind of trivial, relief is granted, like, okay, well, you can't enter in the text messages or something like that, right? And maybe that would not be trivial, but you get what I'm saying, like some kind of trivial punishment for them for doing that. That would seem, if it's raised, to me, it seems most likely we would see something like that, to where the judge would pay proverbial lip service to it, right? But ultimately not really do much of anything about it. That, if it is raised, I believe is probably the most likely scenario. But again, and look, that obviously would set it up for appeal. So again, this thing could be going for a very long time if they insist on keeping this path of injustice that I see. So how about the court? So the court could appoint a neutral. So this is when the court is trying to decide whether they're going to allow this or not, right? They could appoint a neutral forensic expert to analyze the available evidence and chime in about the necessity of or benefits deriving from exhuming, potential benefits deriving from an exhumation. They might allow a limited reexamination of preserved biologics, right? So I think there is some biologics that they have preserved. Perhaps they let some type of analysis of it might speak to whether, there's reason to exhume Charlie Kirk's body. Now, that's not a real strong element there, but that crossed my mind today and wanted to throw that out there. Disclosure of withheld forensic materials, if any. So again, if there's found to be any withheld forensic materials, they could require the disclosure of it. But most definitely, if it's raised, I think they would have an evidentiary hearing. I would, if I were the defense counsel, I would most definitely request an evidentiary hearing where my experts could give live testimony about the need or propriety of an exhumation of Charlie Kirk's, uh, what I call big biologic, right? Is big biologic himself. Um, here's and we're kind of nearing the end here, so let me just do, I guess, some of my. I wrote a few bullets here for my specific commentary. So, exhumation would theoretically show us the number, location, and severity of the wounds suffered. Okay, and this is assuming that if we go exhume the body, that we even have something to dig up, right? And again, that's speculation on a lot of people's parts, but I just want to throw that out there because I'm not calling them crazy, and I haven't completely foreclosed it. But if there is indeed some exhumation to occur, it would theoretically show us the number suffered, right? And that's also assuming too that it hasn't decomposed too much. It could show us the angle of the shot, the alleged shot, right? Should be able to show us the angle of that shot. Could be ascertained by analyzing, his body. The angle of the alleged shot would potentially help identify the position of any alleged shooter, right? And I think that's one of the main things that Dr. Martinson could say is that being able to inspect Charlie Kirk's body potentially could help firm up or prove or even reject these alternative shooter position theories that he, at the time, at least the video that I watched, was entertaining. And then we would be able from there potentially to have a better, or at least have a much better understanding if Tyler Robinson was involved, or at least who could have been involved, right? If we're able to for sure firm up by defense expert looking on the cause of death, that, because and hats off to Candace and Barron and all them for really going down this path of who else could be involved here, because if we're able to exhume the body, and we're able to ascertain exactly how Charlie Kirk was unalived, well, at this juncture, because of the investigation that's already occurred, I think just in that we would start to have a pretty good idea of who all was involved in this, right? So kudos to all the investigators out there who've been really digging in here. Because of that work, we're literally turning over one stone away from having a really, really good firm idea potentially of who actually did this. And then here in my dreamland, okay, in my dreamland, here's how Judge looks at this and reviews the case. He thinks the scene was altered. Okay, it was paved over, it's covered up, no doubt. That impaired defense's testing. Defense experts have been hampered in their testing of their theories because of the alteration and destruction of the crime scene. Because of this, due process concerns are now present, okay, because of the covering up of the crime scene. Although dismissal is a very drastic, punitive measure for a court to take in this instance, it certainly seems, based upon the state's culpability, something that might be warranted here. And then also think an adverse inference can get messy. It can be hard a lot of times for juries to appropriately apply those adverse inferences. And so in his mind, is there a narrower fix? Yeah, there's a narrower fix. It's called exhuming the body and doing a forensic analysis of it to try to recover, at least get some of the or same or substantially similar data points that we could have gotten had the crime scene not been covered up. I think that analysis is the most just. I think if that's the analysis and it comes out that the body can be exhumed, right now, the way I'm thinking, that is the most just way that this proceeding can go, to be quite honest. Just my opinion, right? And there's a lot of loose ends in that, okay? There's a lot of loose ends, a lot of evidence we haven't seen. We don't know everything that they have. This is really just based upon the research discussions I've done, looking into this, looking at the law, I kind of feel that if this proceeding went in that direction, and again, that's assuming that there is a biologic there to examine, I think that we'd be getting close to the path of justice down that road, in my personal opinion. Hey, if not outright dismissal, right? Again, to me, the covering of the crime scene is a very heinous thing. Very heinous thing. Very suspicious and heinous thing for me. And so, yeah, I think dismissal very, very well might be warranted. But, considering all the competing interests involved here and just saying, hey, let's try to shoot a middle path, I honestly think this exhumation of the biologic is that path, is the path. So that's all I have on this, y'all. I hope y'all like that. Sorry if this took longer than I thought. So I'll go to the comments now. Thank y'all. I appreciate it. And I'm very very happy that Barron last night said, hey, gloves off. I mean, not that I was waiting for his instruction or guidance or anything. I don't mean that in a negative connotation, but yeah, let's do it. I just look, even before I started my channel, I sat back and just thought to myself of how important it is to educate everybody on, just what normally should we see here. That's really my goal, is just to give you all an idea of, in the normal run of cases, what should we probably be seeing. And again, Barron, other lawyers probably disagree. They probably might have a little different twist on what we should see going. But I think the important part of it is that what us lawyers are telling us you should see isn't what you're seeing. Okay. I think that's the important part, really, is just that y'all have that contrast. You see what I mean? That you have that contrast between kind of what the normal process of events or sequence of events, and then what we're seeing. And then we can all from there draw our own adult, hopefully reasonable conclusions, things of that nature. Okay. So anyways, let's go to the comments. Thank y'all very much, everybody being here today. Man, I'm loving this. I'm really loving it, and I'll be coming back for more. Even the seemingly negative, bad comments don't really get at me at all. That's the name of the game. I knew what this was hitting before I got in it. Although I'll say, the negative comments have been a very small handful. Very small handful. Most of them have been super supportive and positive, and they keep me coming back every day. So thank y'all. I assume that was why okay. Yeah, Lena. I don't know if or where he's been buried. I don't. I think I remember something with J.D. Vance flying with allegedly his body on Air Force Two or something like that. So again, and to me, that just makes it even more suspicious. So okay, LW, they needed to sweep the crime scene for explosive and chemical residue. Yep, that would help for John Bray's theory for the exploding microphone. Candace mentioned Operation Valhalla too. Yeah, I think I remember that one. If CK is on island, he needs to come back and take Eric or Kirk with him. Man. Yeah. Let's see. There is a Valhalla, New York. I called and nobody was there. Has seen Mr. Kirk. I absolutely believe Charlie's dead. The folks involved not fool around. Cash needs to go away. He's compromised. Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh, here we go. Oh, the pseudo bot. Hey, Blue Babe. Hey, good to see you here. If I was seeming kind of like short and sharp with you, I really wasn't trying to be. And the reason why I thought it was a bot, to be quite honest with you, and this could have just been me being mistaken. I thought I saw two comments about Miss Burkhart that were exactly the same, wording, spacing, and maybe I could have been mistaken on that and why I thought you were a bot. I do apologize. I didn't mean to get offensive there. I honestly did think at first it was. I honestly don't think Charlie would be able to live with himself if a 22-year-old kid was sentenced to death in order for Charlie to restart his life somewhere else. Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, we got to think if CK is still alive, right? I mean, certainly he wouldn't want to watch an innocent 22-year-old person be put to death. Or really, I mean, I would feel terrible just now, because let me tell y'all something. I told you I've been through addiction before. I've been in county jails. They're terrible. Okay, they're terrible. I definitely, in to the extent Tyler Robinson wasn't involved in innocent stuff, I feel sorry for him having to brave being in a county jail. I would feel sorry just for someone being in the county jail for too awful long, mistakenly or erroneously. Me. Let's see. Susan says she's with the exploding mic theory. Where's Charlie buried? I don't know. Last thing I heard about him, he was located on Air Force Two, and then there's a Instagram picture, with his wife and holding his hand in the casket. So Mellow Fish seems to think that he was unalived. Susan, I wonder if we'll ever know the truth. I don't know. That's good. I mean, we're trying our best. We'll just leave it at that. We are trying our best, Miss Susan. Let's see. I wonder how the prosecutor will explain the burns and multiple non-gun wounds. Well, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I do. I think exhuming the body is probably right now the number one thing that could be done for justice in this situation. I really do. Pressure on the government's always good. It is. But just so y'all know, I'm not depressed. I'm a very happy person. I got my buddy Bear here. He keeps me very, very happy. I love him. I love my wife. And so I don't have plans to go anywhere quick. Okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. So yeah, anyways, let's keep going. You made it to the live. Allegedly, maybe, perhaps. I love the screen name. I love it. Let's see. Yeah, I know it. Bought my ticket to Valhalla Island. Yeah, maybe we should all take a vacation down there. Maybe that can be part of the investigation, huh? That's right. Maybe we should do a GoFundMe for the channel where we raise money for the investigation and we all take a trip down to this Valhalla resort at the island. We'll have a few cocktails on the beach and chill, and maybe we find what we're looking for. Maybe we don't, but hey, maybe we'll probably get a tan. We'll probably feel a little bit better, relax, a little less depressed when we show back up. Yeah, I'm down with that. I don't know how the defense overcomes that in Utah County. Let's see. So true, Mellofish. And then they're concerned that independent jurors. Just so y'all know, I'll be doing Barron did a good discussion last night of the motion that was recently filed. I'm going to do a little bit deeper one tomorrow, just FYI for y'all. Because that slipped behind me in the filing system. I've been checking every few days, and I had actually checked. I think I checked last Thursday, and I think they filed it Thursday. It very well could have been that I just checked before they posted it. But anyways, I'm going to print that out, read it in depth, and then I'll report on it either tomorrow or Wednesday for sure. I did a bunch of Easteen. So on this channel, we're going to start saying Easteen. I did some Easteen investigation and research last night, so I'll probably pick that back up a little bit tomorrow. So let's see. So it seems like people seem to agree that Charlie would be okay with exhuming for purposes of getting down to the bottom of this and getting to the truth. Let's see. Paramount Tactical is so stinking rude to his guests and his followers. I started watching him after Butler and quickly unsubbed. There is no excuse for his behavior. Oh, I haven't really, to be honest, I've only seen a few of his videos, and even then I only watched certain parts to kind of get the context or research I was doing at the time. I haven't seen him act rude towards guests, but I mean, look, just in my orbit, more people than not aren't fans of Gary at Paramount Tactical. To be quite honest, I've never had any dealings with him in any way. He seems like he has an okay disposition to me, but I can just say this, like, just our natural personalities. I don't think that we would like jive together or be like real close buddies or anything like that. But I respect him. I respect his opinion. I just hope that he also respects ours and realize that we won't be stopping asking questions about this case. We're just not. So, again, absent something going down where, something happens to where we get some actual evidence to help us, feel better about what went on there, that might get me off the case, that might get me off the case. And that's the thing. It's like the state, Erica Kirk and TPUSA, it's really in their hands. Day they could come out and show the evidence and stuff that we're all been, explicitly wanting to see, and could put most, if not all, this to bed. Simple as that. But here we are. When you're not transparent like that, you cannot be upset with people who are asking questions and digging. And, you can't be upset when people are talking about your, dating some guy in New York 15 years ago because you lied and said you hadn't been dating. You can't get upset and say, oh my God, they're digging into my private life and all this, because you could have nipped all that in the bud by just being upfront and truthful from the jump. So yeah. Like JFK, the body was altered. In Utah, a surgeon was locked out of the surgical room while feds and Charlie's security team were allowed in. Surgeon was so angry he called someone in DC. Oh, that's incredible, Mel. I didn't know that. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. That's pretty crazy. Gary's still gonna win the Pulitzer for breaking 3 major stories. Okay. Gary needs to switch his logo from a statue, the blue and white Star of David. Oh man. Let's see. Protecting scene preserves truth. The scene is like a snapshot of every footprint. But it is. Yep, Snoops, you're right. I think they're going to say the bullet hit the microphone, the mic exploded, and that's what caused all the damage. All lies but plausible to a jury. I don't know. I don't know if the video supports that, to be quite honest with you, because if I remember in the video, the first puff comes out, like the microphone is still snapped, like right here with the magnet on it, So if the allegation is that this was some type of, then when it comes to it, I can't say, but the gas that when a bullet entered the, oh man, I've already said it 5 million times. But anyways, if they're trying to say that represents the bullet's, expansion or whatever, but that it hit the microphone, I don't know if the video supports that, but hey, but that was still, nothing would surprise me, them trying to surprise me. Let's see. Sorry, I'm still reading through here a bit. Expecting the crime scene would have found microplastic shards covered in. Okay. Yeah, and that's what John Bray, right? That's what John Bray has been advocating, that, they probably some type of explosive charge that would have, there would be residue in and around it. Who is Butch Hibbs with advanced IC-380 South Northwest range view gun for $1,000, Alex? Let's see. What do you say? It's imperative to inspect the body. It's the only way to know if Charlie is actually dead. Yeah. So again, Joe, that was really one of the more major impetus for me doing this episode, right? Was to show the people who think he's still alive that there's actually a way through the court system to really assess that, right? So yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Okay, so then people are saying that filming of the body in the coffin, some people still think that the hand looked really fake, because I think that's all we saw was the hand, but that the hand looked really fake. But then there was some, I think I saw where someone who does, undertaker work said that it's normal for the hands to look bad, so they put makeup on them and stuff, if I remember correctly. So yeah, really just a very confusing thing. This whole thing is, even when I'm like doing my outlines for these episodes, so I get confused all the time, because it's just, stuff is everywhere. There is no official public record. Obviously, theories all over the place. People getting attacked, Fed slop narrative, and God bless Candace and them's, investigation, but it's kind of like over here looking at stuff while we're over here looking, at the actual court proceedings, and then we got the TPUSA fraud people, which I've kind of been involved in all of it, but it just get confusing. It's a little bit all over the place, but as Barron said last night, I'm just very much just very giddy and happy that this independent citizen investigation journalism is occurring. It does give me hope for the future, because if our entire system is as corrupt as some of just as we've seen under some of these rocks we've overturned recently, then I think these are going to be basically the norm moving forward into the future until we can get, everything squared away as far as the corruption. Let's see. Fourth. Looking for questions. Be quiet, I gotta use the bathroom in a minute. Okay. Yeah, I'm about at the end, y'all. I'm a little talked out, to be quite honest. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, everybody. Jordan, good to see you here. I see Jordan's here too. Yeah, thank y'all, everybody, for being here. Yeah, let me know obviously some of y'all have already, but if you haven't, let me know in the comments what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe. Just very honored to be here, educating y'all, and let's keep plugging away, taking a look at this. I will return tomorrow, probably be covering some Easting stuff. I also want to take a look tomorrow. Danks and I think Mr. Let Go maybe did a live stream yesterday. They were talking about the professor watch list that TPUSA I think published back in. Yeah, thank you, Elena. And thank you, Jen M. Anyways, this professor watch list, they published it back in like 2016. I think I want to also talk about that, because I want to talk about it in terms of whether that professor watch list, at the very least when it was published back in 2016, whether it was congruent with TPUSA's stuff at that time. So we'll go into it tomorrow. And then we will also the following day get into the media defense motion that's been filed about secret proceedings. I want to go in depth. I'll probably have a whole episode like this dedicated to it. So anyways, thank y'all so much. Appreciate it. Last thing, we will be getting the Starlink satellite this week. I will be getting a computer this week. I will try to ask my construction people tomorrow where we're at on the podcast studio, but just so everybody knows, we are moving in that direction. So yay. I love it. Thank y'all very much. God bless. And I will see y'all tomorrow. Much love.